So Jimmy Spithill's USA against Dean Barker's Japan, race number 6 of the second round robin stage of the Louis Vuitton America's Cup qualifiers. These two great helmsmen head to head, and the cat and mouse, a very intriguing one. There's already a penalty for the Americans, Ken.
A penalty because they were very late coming into the start box. Dean Barker on starboard tack came in and actually forced them to turn head to wind towards the wind away from the start box. They didn't get in on time. They haven't even gotten into the start box yet. They're going to have to start the race 2 boat lengths behind. That was really interesting. And again, we see how hard it is to accelerate in this lighter condition, because you just don't know if you're going to be up. Dean Barker's going after him again right now. Try to keep him out of the starting box.
Well, it's dog eat dog.
10 seconds to go. Dean Barker's going to be launched at this start because he's up on his foils and going. Oracle's going to burn off their penalty right away, but they got to figure out how to accelerate from a very awkward spot.
And this is what the Japanese have been doing almost every race. Away to a flyer, 25 knots as they hit the start line. And the Americans, well, the penalty is gone, but so too are the Japanese.
Wow. Penalty was immediately burned off, but they're so high up on the box there. We'll go back and watch that, I'm sure, again. They just couldn't accelerate. They couldn't put the bow up toward the wind and actually build that apparent wind speed in order to get the boat going. So here, finally, they get going, and as we've seen in these races, you can lose and gain quite a bit on one bad maneuver. So I don't think this group here on the Japanese boat think this race is over by any means.
Just hitting some form though. SoftBank Team Japan, and well clear as they hit Mark 1, heading downwind for the first time in the race. The Americans, well, they've been talking quite a bit about the need to sharpen up their starts. They've been doing a very good job of clawing back leads, overhauling their opponents. But they are well behind already.
A little concentration from each of the drivers in the boat. You see the difference, both of them sitting up on top or standing up, versus what we saw with Team New Zealand with everybody crouching down. The wing trimmer up in the air, much more of a conventional setup on both of these two boats, if there's anything conventional about these boats. I'm not 100% sure.
So two great helmsmen, of course, the two who went head-to-head in the most dramatic America's Cup finish ever back in 2013 in San Francisco. The Americans back from 8-1 down against the Kiwis, led by Barker back then in what is widely regarded as the most remarkable sporting comeback in history. As we see the jibe from the Americans.
Smooth. Very, very smooth.
We're gonna go a little low mode or normal? Normal.
Let's hear from Joey Newton, a part of the USA team here involved for us on the water. Joey, you were involved 4 years ago in that drama. Can you just give us a little bit of an insight into this brilliant rivalry between Spithill and Barker?
Well, it's actually been going on for longer than that. Jimmy and Barker have been sailing against each other for probably the best part of 20 years, and that sort of culminated in the last Cup where obviously they're 8-1 down. We managed to win 8 straight and retain the America's Cup. So now they're great friends. I wouldn't have called them great friends at the end of that last America's Cup, but it's been interesting to see the two of them and a lot of the Team New Zealand guys that now work for SoftBank Team Japan, how they've come to sort of start working together with people that were their enemies.
It's a fascinating dynamic, isn't it, in such a kind of sharp-elbowed sport, to actually have a friendship and a rivalry simultaneously. It's a tricky little balance, I would suggest, to try to maintain that.
Yeah, it is, Ali, and it's been interesting to see it sort of evolve as these two teams have grown. But you know, yachting in a professional sense is actually a pretty small sport, and it's a pretty small group of people that do this professionally. So, you know, we've known Dean and his guys the same way we know all the guys on Team New Zealand or the British team. We know them all. We're all good friends with each other. You know, we're happy to have a beer with each other, but that all sort of stops when the race starts. And
that is absolutely how it should be.
Stand by.
Japanese maintaining this lead at the moment. How are you seeing this, Kenny?
Well, nothing in it, really. That lead has kind of been maintained by the Japanese at this stage, but both boats clearly sailing well, sailing stable. Japanese have been out of the water 100% of the time, but it doesn't mean that the Americans haven't actually clawed back a little bit. Nobody's had to do that massive dip speed build yet. They both maintained being out of the water for the most part, although I say that, and it looks like the Japanese are a little glued right now, and they better get going because Oracle's coming on fast. Speed differences are amazing. You notice that if you're going to look at these two wings and against the wingtips below, that one and that one are virtually identical. Now, supposedly you can put different tips on from day to day or different experiment, and that might just be the very end of that unit. But for the most part, these are really similar packages. And technique, this is the technique race, because if you got similar packages, then technique is inevitably going to be the balance of power for one versus the other.
So around about 100 meters as Oracle Team USA pass in behind SoftBank Team Japan, and again, the weight distribution is something that the Americans are concerned with, seemingly.
Yeah, that's tactician Tom Slingsby, all the way out, not all the way out on the front of that, on the front of the hull, but certainly well further forward than he typically is.
Okay, let's stand by. I want to go a little early. Stand the pressure. Okay. Trim, big trim. Happy? 4, 3, 2, 1. Got it. Sorry. Press, big press. Spill, guys.
That wasn't the sharpest of tacks from Oracle Team USA, but the recovery was a good one, and interesting to hear the sorry from Jimmy Spithill. He's taking responsibility for any little dip of the hull.
The ugh and then the sorry. I'm not sure exactly who said sorry, but somebody said sorry. It doesn't take much, and they all know the consequences of plowing the boat in and getting slow and getting those two holes in the water. The consequences are massive. Now, even with that bad tack, this is a very close race. Again, two very similar packages, meaning how they use the wings above and below the deck. The headsails are exactly identical. It's one of the features of this America's Cup that all the headsails are one design, so they don't have any choice there. Big moment. Will Dean Barker make that left side of the gate?
He looks to be on track.
Can he get around that mark? Because if he can get around that mark, then he won't have to do another tack. And we know tacking and jibing is awfully slow out here right now. And it looks like he's going to make it pretty easily and be able to accelerate, and the yo-yo extends. You know, you start going, he'll start going away pretty quick, about 7 or 8 knots faster, downwind than upwind.
Yeah. 25 to boundary. Your cat's in here, mate. Holding at 20 to boundary. No deeper. Getting up.
Give a good team a lead, and a good team should be able to hold it, you know, and
like to get rudder equalised on the exit.
looking like a good team out here today. One win already notched on their belt, and they're looking for 2. And I tell you what, 2 wins, all of a sudden they're on 4.
Let's just keep going.
They're on 4 overall points, same as BAR. Well ahead of Artemis in France. Quite a day, but like I said, 1 bad tack, 1 bad jibe, and this disappears in a heartbeat.
So a battle of wills, a battle of techniques, a battle of helmsmen.
If we got pressure, I think we should use a normal rudder swap.
Dean Barker relishing the competition.
Okay, copy, mate.
Won the America's Cup with Team New Zealand 17 years ago. Took the helm for the final race. Russell Coutts made way.
Yeah.
And since then, he has been involved in so many skirmishes since. There's the chase from the Americans. Not too far behind, and as Ken keeps mentioning, all it is one maybe even one very small error.
And look at the profiles again. I mean, they could be potentially absolutely identical. What Joey Newton on the water, who's part of the Oracle Team USA team, obviously was saying there are some nuance. There is a little bit of differences, as they are different programs per se, but for the most part, they look pretty darn similar to me. Slingsby goes from leaning on the front beam upwind to hopping on a bicycle and pumping like a madman downwind.
So that's the hybrid, the only team in the fleet to operate both the cyclor style grinding and the more traditional style.
Joey, not a shock to see these two teams right now with pretty much attached with a string.
Yeah, that's right, Ken. Like we were talking about before, they're super similar packages and they go about the same speed. The difference that we see on the race course here is the difference in the unforced error we saw Team USA make in the start there by being late to their entry, and they're still paying for it now.
Way forwards, guys.
It's interesting that Oracle Team USA decided to do 2 jives there. We know how costly those jive maneuvers are. And there they are going pretty slow, 15 knots. They didn't just decide to follow them in, do 1 jibe and in there, but on the other side of the coin, they're going to get a split and maybe have a little wind shift to take advantage of out there.
Gonna need some pitch here, boys. Nice. How far? 25.
As far as nuance is concerned, you know, these guys are talking about not only do the dagger boards go fore and aft and up and down and back and forth, side to side, but the rudders move around. I believe, and Joey, talk to us about this. Well, let's listen for a second.
If we got pressure, I think we could use a normal rudder.
He's talking about normal rudder. We got some pressure. We're talking about normal rudder angles. Joey, what are these guys talking about out here? Because this is terminology that the sailing world hasn't heard before. What's a normal rudder angle?
But they're either talking about the feel of the rudder to the helmsman, so how much wing trim they're using, and windward and leeward helm. So the helmsman will be talking to the wing trimmer about how he's setting up the wing to make the boat feel differently for him. And also they can be talking about the rudders can be set to different angles, and that affects the lift at the back of the boat. So they could be talking about the way the rudders are set there.
Keep pressing, Dino.
Only 80 meters in between it, so Oracle forced that split at the bottom gate.
Seems to be paying off.
Yeah, it wasn't paying off early on. They lost quite a bit doing those 2 extra jives, but all of a sudden, this is an even boat race. Fascinating.
Well, battle is joined at this point, isn't it? No question about it. And when they split that gate, Ken, just again to explain for those who might not be terribly familiar with it, they're essentially rolling the dice to some degree to see if they can hunt for a little bit of extra wind up the other side of the course.
You're the boat behind, and you know, at some stage you throw caution to the wind, and you know, being behind by a small amount or a large amount doesn't matter. You're behind. Behind is behind. A loss is a loss.
Got him just not laying. What we're going to be going
but
for
this is incredible. This is something we've seen from the Japanese now on several races where solid, good leads have evaporated very, very quickly. And here we go again.
Actually, happy VMG. VMG is good.
Really something. Joey, that was a huge turn of events. Wind shift, boat speed, technique, combination of all the above.
I think that was just wind speed.
We're going to be going for the
it was a pretty big risk that Oracle took, but look, at this point in the race, you've got to roll the dice. And you know, Jimmy and Tom made a good call to go to a different mark. They paid a penalty to do it, but as you see, you get a little bit more wind speed in these boats, and they just rocket ahead.
Well, we keep hearing it, don't we? Fortune favours the brave in these boats.
Okay, good pressure.
We've heard it from so many different helmsmen. If you try and drive these things cautiously, you get caught out. You've got to go at full tilt. You've got to give it everything.
Yep, going for the cross.
Best tack right now, going for a cross. This is a big moment.
High build, we want to lay, have to lay.
Big moment in the race. The Japanese got a little puff. Could they get up to him on starboard? It certainly doesn't look like it. And now Oracle has to lay. They don't want to have to tack again. You heard Slingsby say, we got to lay. That means they have to get through this gate without having to do another maneuver. Wow, what a change. My goodness, what a turn of events that was.
hats off to the Americans as they round
and we'll be taking
Gate 5.
Equalising.
Downwind for one final time for Oracle Team USA and Jimmy Spithill. Another masterclass
Good pressure here.
in working
we've
their
got
way
1
back
minute
from
here,
a
so
rather
let's settle
perilous
in.
position early on in the race.
You know, unlike a lot of the passes we've seen in this event so far that have just become very obvious, you know, plaster the boat in the water in this light air, kind of gluing the two hulls to the water, not being able to go. There was nothing blatantly obvious there, so that really tells you what Joey said. That was very likely either wind pressure or a big wind angle change. And boy, oh boy, it went from a reasonably solid Japanese lead to just a thrashing.
Both equal, okay? Happy. 3, 2, 1. It'll be very light out of this
frustrating.
again.
I mean, listen, we've all been there. I've been there probably more times than not. And you're through, like you said, rolling the dice if you're Tom Slingsby at that bottom gate, and all of a sudden 0 to hero. You know, it's pretty, pretty amazing.
Well, they're really enjoying the wind speed here as well. The Americans beginning to fly 25 knots.
Finishing at the bottom, okay? No reach at the moment.
And the finishing line not too far away.
Can you just double check that on your display, Langers? Saying finishing at the bottom? Okay, it says 10 seconds to allay. Let's stand by.
Little confused on board the boat right there. Whether there's one more reach leg in, that conventional reach into the finish.
You definitely want to make sure you know where the tape is.
Well, they'll go through it anyway, but I heard Slingsby saying, I don't think there's a reach, but I'm pretty sure we think there's a reach.
Yeah, no issues.
That's what we understand. There's the finish line. It's back to the old school runway of the opening few days here in Bermuda. And the Americans are flying towards it at great speed and with great confidence, knowing that they're going to pull clear of the fleet once again with another victory here.
Just in 2 seconds.
Looks like he put his bicycle seat up in the air a little bit so he can see better. Did you see that? I mean, he's been down low when it's windy.
Race committee, did you say finishing at the bottom, Mark?
Oracle, finish at the dock. Finish at the dock.
Okay, continuing on. Continuing straight.
So the voice is that of Ian Murray, just confirming that they do need to reach across wind to the finish.
We keep on the foil.
Like any good relationship, the key is communication. Alan?
Hit it, guys, hit it.
Well, what a race from the Americans. The Japanese, who had such an excellent start, and they really did look as if they were in the box seat.
Shocker, really.
Their race is run at this point. The defenders.
These guys are going to be really mad at this race. Mark my words.
They had it in their grasp. It was there to be taken. And it's been stolen from underneath their noses. Great bit of sailing from the Americans. Tactically very astute.
Big light.
Sometimes you need a little bit of luck.
That bow down trim for aerodynamics, for grip on the weather rudder, using the wings or what they call the elevators on the rudder on the high side of the boat to grip this rudder right here. That actually is pulling the windward side down and actually creating more of what we call righting moment in our sport, allowing you to power up the sail plan that much more.
Well, a roll of the dice on leg 5, upwind. It has paid off in spades for the Americans. They found the wind in their favor, and they have notched up yet another victory. It's their 6th here in Bermuda, and the defenders are firing on all cylinders.
Remarkable race, really. The closest race we've seen, a couple passes, 2 well-sailed boats, and just out of sync for a couple minutes there by the SoftBank Team Japan.
Sorry, boys.
It was Chris Draper. There you go, putting your hand up. That's the sign of a leader. Tactician putting his hand up, saying, sorry, boys. Again, we've all been there. I always think that's the key part of the race for any leadership group, the afterguard, to put up their hand and say, my bad.
Very difficult for the Japanese crew to compute that defeat, because they got off to such a flyer. And of course, they were looking to build on that victory over the French in the opening race of the day.